In this video, we're going to have a look at how to use the new Stair Tool in ArchiCAD 21. Once we open it up, we see it's very, very different from 20, which is great because it used to be quite difficult. The good thing is there's a lot of two things. There's a lot of settings. There's a lot of user-defined settings, and then there's a whole lot of the ability for ArchiCAD to figure it out or have a little bit of intelligence itself. So what we need to start with is by adding in some of the parameters. Now, just like any good computer program, a computer program can't really think all that much for itself without parameters. So we need to define what our parameters are. Now, what do those mean? In Australia, that's our legal definitions based on Australian standards and BCA of what a stair can do. So this is a cheat sheet that I made up based on the BCA or NCC Part 3.91 and Australian Standard 1657, talking about how a stair needs to work. Now, what you'll find if you've looked into this before is that residential and commercial stairs are going to have slightly different requirements. Generally, when I've got things in brackets, what I'm saying is that's for commercial. Now, I've got minimums, maximums, and ideals, because generally speaking, just because something is minimum doesn't mean it's the best response. So, yeah, have a look at this. Hopefully, if you spent any time looking at this before, you'll understand that hopefully using something like this will save you a lot of time. Now, for our stairs, what we see is that these numbers, let's talk about riser or going, landing and width, even this one here, slope relationship 2r plus g, will be seen here. Number of stairs, what's this? This is our riser, this is our tread or our going, we see g here, riser going, 2 riser plus g, so that's our relationship. Automatic landing width, so again a minimum of 900. Walking line offset, where's that? Let's look at that again. What that's talking about is this dash line in the middle, saying maybe if it's less than a meter, that should be in the middle of the line. Maybe if it's a spiral staircase, it should be at least 400 millimeters in from the middle. What's that sort of talking about? Spiral staircases can have very, very small treads in the middle, particularly if it's a full circle with a very, very small center column, and that's not really safe. So we might want to think about safety in addition to legal minimums. But this is to give us the ability for ArchiCAD to really automate our designing of stairs for us. So we need to be relatively happy with these numbers. So this is what I've got it at the moment. Now you'll see that these numbers don't necessarily match up with these numbers, and that's okay, because what I'm doing is saying I need to be within my legal requirements, but this is what I actually want to design to. This is what makes a good design of a good stair in my thoughts. So that's it for now. Once we've got our settings right, there's a lot more settings that we can look at in terms of the structure of the stair, the shape of the stair, and that might be based on what material you're building it out of, whether that's a steel staircase, a timber, concrete, or maybe a combination of the two. And we've got both structure and then finish, tread, and rises. So you can see that there's a huge amount of additional information that we can start to put into ArchiCAD that I think has always been there to a degree. Some of it's brand new, but it's definitely more user-friendly than ever before. So that's great. Nosing, what is nosing? When we look at Australian standards, we find that it's quite limited. Australian standards don't really talk about it very, very much. But if we look at international standards for nosing, then they have a lot more information on what is acceptable and what is the legal requirements for nosing. In a residential stair, we often see that nosing isn't considered at all. For an open riser or a timber stair, we have to consider not only the length of the nosing. So what's nosing? Nosing is the relationship between the tread. So tread is, let's say, from the front of the stair to the back of the stair. Going is the relationship from the front of the stair, sorry, let's use the correct term, the front of the tread to the next tread, that's what going is, and and nosing is the relationship between the two. So whether it's a step, whether it's a bit that hangs out, we could call that a cantilevered end, or whether that's an angled, and we more commonly see this on a concrete stair, it's both nosing. Now this one's probably a little bit safer, less ability to get your toe caught or bash the back of your heel if you're walking down the staircase. So that's what we're trying to achieve, and it's great that ArchiCAD now gives us the ability to really start to define this and look at how that might work and the shape that we'd be creating while doing our stair. Now, the reason why we get this right first, I often talk about it doesn't matter if you do it right first or later, is that if we do it right first, then this is going to apply to all of our stairs, and it will be basically a templated setting, so we don't have to edit this every time. Now, when we draw a stair, how do we do this now in ArchiCAD 21? It's definitely different. We don't place it like an object anymore. We start, and then we stretch. Now, we can see here that I just chose to click anywhere, and it's not necessarily doing it in the right place, and we've got a great little palette here which is giving me different settings. How big do I want this stair to be, and how do I want to position it? So I can decide how tall my stair is. I can say I want it to be linked. So we've seen this already done with walls, which is a fantastic tool. So we can say that our stair goes from story to story, which means in my situation, that's 3 meters. Now, where do we get 3 meters from? That's a story setting. Right-click, story settings. So we see that from the ground to the roof, first to roof or ground to first, that's 3 meters. So that's what we're talking about at the moment. Back into the stair settings. Now, if I want it to be a single flight or an L-shaped flight or a U-shaped flight, I could do that. Now, in my situation, that's not really what I want to do. I'm actually going to do it as 2 different flights just to make it easier for this video. We might look at a more complicated stair later. So what I'm going to do here is, I wish there was an option that could say linked and then half. That would be really good. Flexible is probably a great idea, which means it can be adjusted, which means it's sort of up to other decisions built into ArchiCAD. So we're going to go not linked, and for the moment we're just going to call it 1500, meaning that it's half of my story to story. So unfortunately that means I'm losing some of that capability, but it's fine for now. Now I'm going to change the baseline direction, because in this case I'm wanting to draw it against this wall. So now we see that when we start to draw, now it's automatically snapping to this side. Now let's just zoom in and see what's happening a bit more. As I'm starting to draw, it's automatically calculating 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 stairs within its acceptable range. But then when I get to the end, you see then it starts to give me the ability to stretch. Why is it doing that? Because I have a range of acceptable going relationship. Again, it gives me the ability to stretch. Let's move this palette away a little bit. Thanks for that. Stretch up to a full height of 2400. Now, why is that happening? So effectively what we're saying is 8 steps, 8 goings for a total of 2400. So let's get the calculator out. 2400 divided by 8 equals 300. If we go into our stairs, that's because we've got a maximum going of 300. So if I say, I don't want that to be 300, I want that to be 270, then we start drawing that stair again. We're now going to see that it's going to limit the total length of our stair to 2160, and just to make this really obvious, 2160 divided by 8 equals, there you go. So it's very user-defined, it's very interactive. Now you might find it tricky to start to use this straight away without actually doing some guidelines. So what I would tend to do is to start to use some guidelines, or start to draw something and then start to move it around. So of course I could stretch this, or I could move it. I'm going to move it to the door, and then I'm going to move it away from the door. Let's say 1200 to begin with. 1200 being the landing that we might want to create. Now if I go 1200, what does that leave me with on the other side? That only leaves me with 950. So that might be too small. Do I need it to be 270 between stair to stair? No, I could legally do 250, but that's probably a little bit tight. Now, therefore, if I'm going to choose one or the other, 270, 250, or anywhere in between, what's going to make that decision for me? Maybe it's based on the space available to me, but realistically, that space is just defined by me anyway. It's based on my design. So I can make that whatever I wanted to. Let's just move it a bit. So let's move it up another 100 millimeters using the drag tool. So now we've got a distance from the end of the stair to the door or the wall for 1100. That's still definitely within our legal ability, so that's fine. And then we see from here to the end is now 1050. Now I haven't put in a wall here yet. That could of course stick out a little bit if we wanted to, and we might end up doing that. We're going to have a look at that later. Now I'm not finished quite yet. What I want to do to make this work properly for me would be to mirror a copy. Now we see currently that this stair is reasonably narrow for the space. So it's an 1100 wide stair, but that leaves me with a 410mm gap between. I could make the stair bigger so there's no gap between if I wanted to, but the thing that we haven't yet allowed for is the railing. We're going to have a look at that in the next video. Now the great thing about the railing tool in ArchiCAD 21 is it's not part of the stair tool. It's actually a new object, but it works automatically with those. Now, of course, I didn't do this right. I'd need to rotate this to make it work properly. Rotate. And of course, what I'm trying to achieve is that part of this is for each story. So I need to understand really how this is working. Let's stretch that out so that's the same. So we're saying that from many, depending on how I'm trying to represent this, that this one maybe starts at minus 1500. So that's coming up to a landing on this level. And this one here starts at 0, so it's going up to the next level. So in terms of slabs, I need to add one in here. Why does it have a cover fill? Just so you can see it at the moment. Now that's 0 going down from the top. Let's get rid of that surface for now so we're understanding that a bit better. And of course we can drag this. Let's do that properly. Drag from this point here. Now when we're creating stairs, how do we make them? My preference is these options here, that we start with the riser and we end with the riser. That means that we make our slabs or our landings do the rest of the work to join it up. I think that is the most practical way that conforms with the way that our stairs work in terms of an Australian standard. And we see that's overlapping here, and that's because what we're not seeing is the nosing. So we're allowing for our nosing to line up with the landing, not necessarily the back of our tread, in case you're wondering why that's doing that. That looks a bit odd. Now that we've created that, let's just have a quick look. We'll just select all these in 3D. That was just a previous stair that popped up quickly. Of course, I try to practice what I'm doing before I do it, just so I don't look silly. And there we go, we see as a landing. Now there's something else showing up on this page, which is my grid line, which is why that's not representing really nicely. Let's just go back up, grab those again, deselect the grid line by holding shift. We'll go back into those now, right click, show selection in 3D marquee, and now that should allow me to rotate this a lot more simply. It hates me. Let's use the explore tool. Hold shift to make it a bit faster. Yeah, so we can see that that's how our stair's working. And now, of course, this is the relationship of the stairs for one story. So this would be leading down, and this would be leading up to our next story. And of course, therefore, once we've got that as a model, we can multiply that and use that on different different stories. This is currently first floor. We could copy paste down onto ground floor, or like we talked about in the last video, we could potentially turn this into a module file, which means it's automated. So we can copy paste, and then update it from an external source to be able to make it reflect on however many instances we place it. Why do we use a module file? Generally, if we're doing something in repetition, if it's done more than once, rather than having to make multiple changes, we can just update it and that will automatically update and change on all instances. So that's the end of this video. Now I'll do some more videos later on looking at a more complicated type of stair, but for this project we're just trying to keep it very simple. And now we can of course go in and change the numbering of these as well if that's what we want to do, but that really just depends on the relationship between spaces and how that works. So this is fine for now. Alright, that's it for this video. In the next video we'll have a look at how to do the railings to suit this staircase.